Deceit. Is it all lies, or is it really the DPS king as so many claim? Before we get into this, I'm not here to police your fun or tell you what you should or should not play. All I do is compare numbers with a spreadsheet and then leave you to make your mind up as to whether you wish to use something or not. I just do the numbers. What you do with them is up to you. I'm not telling you this is bad. I'm not telling you it's good. I'm telling you the numbers. First off, Deceit. It is a long gun, has 2 rounds per second, a 6-round magazine. At level 10 it will have 360 damage. Has the mod Ouroboros, conjures 3 swords fragments that encircle the wielder for 30 seconds. Performing a melee attack lets loose a fragment which taints the blood of targets, causing all attacks from Deceit to register as weak point shots for a short period of time. Charged melee attacks fire all remaining fragments at once. It's a pinpoint accurate weapon with a split barrel that fires 2 penetrating rounds. High base damage, but cannot score weak points unless the mod is active. Just to show that we can calculate damage, I'm going to put pulse rifle on because it's a little bit easier to work with. So we're just going to dump into this, registering our normal hits as well as our maximum crit because of where we're running momentum, which is working as intended. Our base hit is 104, our max crit is 240. The sheet above is the stats for this build, and the sheet at the bottom is the one for our damage. Our hit 104, crit is 240 at max, which means our weak point is going to be 260, and our weak point crit at max is going to be 599. Hopefully we can see all of the numbers here. Calculating the damage is the easy part, then calculating the average DPS is a bit more convoluted, but with this build, with burst, sustained, moving around, running around, potentially getting hit, our average DPS per second is going to end up about 2018. Now, to calculate Deceit is actually remarkably easy because you just need to do it in 2 separate parts, and although it's in 2 separate parts, it is remarkably easier. We either calculate base and crits or weak points and weak point crits. There's like no middle ground, so it kind of ends up being a lot less work to do, but at the same time, what people probably don't realise is its damage is split between the 2 shots, so we still end up actually doing the overall same equation anyway. Where on my sheet it's going to say you're hitting 1796 on a crit, what's actually happening is you're hitting like 898, but you need to get 2 crits in order to actually equate the full crit, which is quite strange. Obviously there are going to be decimal placings in this, so do remember that I'm not showing the decimals, so it will be like 1 or 2 numbers out depending on whether the spreadsheet has rounded up or down, and the game might have done it in the complete opposite direction. That being said, this game does seem to be pretty damn on point with it, simply just because it's not the Division 2 and I'm out of practice doing real math. Now, I did have to change the build for this one just to try and get a higher uptime on the mod usage. However, hopefully you will see that a lot of the numbers, if you double them up, will actually correspond. However, just in case you can't be bothered to do the quick math of it, 2099 times 2 is 4198, weak point crit, 4198. Now, like I said just then, I had to put on a specific build to actually get the decent uptime I needed to try and get the full damage potential of this damn weapon, which is immediately its biggest problem. Like, the overall capability it has is amazing if you can manage it, and managing it was a nightmare on the range on a target that stands still and I don't have to run around or heal or do anything else or dodge. Like, managing this just in the open world is going to be annoying, let alone in a boss fight. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible. There are obviously going to be some very, very skilled players out there that can utilize this weapon to great effect. I've seen a few of them. But for the average Joe that is going to be playing this weapon immediately at this point is near enough out of bounds, just because it's going to be an absolute ball ache just to manage it. Now I'm just going to go back to the range because it's the easiest way to show damage. We're going to ignore the total and the DPS on the right hand side. This is the stats for Deceit. I've put Pulse Rifle up there just so you can see the numbers are the exact same. It's the exact same build as what I was using earlier. The only difference is going to be their base weapon damage, which for Pulse Rifle was 48, Deceit is 360. And then when we come to the DPS side, the things that would have changed is going to be the rounds per second, the magazine size, and then the reload. Now what the reload isn't taken into account is every time I'm reloading, I'm also having to do the melee attack in order to proc the Ouroboros talent itself. Now, what you're actually watching isn't accurate to the spreadsheet because the spreadsheet is assuming 100% uptime on Ouroboros, which is how I've seen a lot of people be able to play this weapon. But even then, the average DPS is only going to be about 2,630, whereas with Pulse Rifle it was 2,018. So in the grand scheme of things, Deceit isn't actually that much more powerful than the Pulse Rifle, at least with 100% uptime on its mod, and we didn't even put a mod on the Pulse Rifle and add that into our equations. Don't get me wrong, there is no mod that we could put on the Pulse Rifle that would allow it to catch up to this damage, but at the same time, thinking that you're able to have 100% uptime on Deceit is not going to be a very viable way to go, especially considering if we calculate Deceit without the weak points, we end up with a horrifically pitiful number, which then means if we want to calculate our average DPS between all weak points and non-weak points, we need to add everything together and then divide by 2, at which point our average DPS comes out at a measly 1,785. Yeah. Now obviously this is just with a very simple build. I'm using Stone of Expanse, Vestige of Power. This is essentially 22% damage. Then I have Moonlit Circuit for another 20% ranged damage. On top of that, I'm using Probability Chord for 20% critical hit damage, and Xania's Malice for another 30% weak point. On my relic, I am utilising 3 mythics for 10% range damage, 10% crit chance, and 20% critical hit damage, and that is it. This is a pretty solid base for any build to work with. We've got an increase in range damage by 42%. We have an increase in our weak point by 30% and an increase in our critical hit damage by 50% shared between the relics as well as Probability Chord. It is by no means going to be the best build for either of these two weapons. However, comparing two separate weapons on two separate builds is going to give very skewed results, so we need to compare them on the same build, as well as calculating in their overall uptime. What this means so far though is, unless you're able to manage Ouroboros, the mod on Deceit, the overall effect and power of Deceit is quite lackluster, especially when compared to just any other weapon. However, if you are able to manage Ouroboros and have very good uptime, you might actually end up suffering in your overall damage, but you might be able to get more uptime, therefore leading to more DPS. What I mean by this is as follows. The top build is the one that I did all the comparisons with, where we hit an average of 2,631. The bottom build is the build that I made to ensure 100% uptime on Ouroboros. It also had an increase of 25% weak spot damage through the Ring of Flawed Beauty. We also used Feyrin's Sigil to get more mod power on crits and weak point hits. Ironically, we're going to be hitting a lot of weak points. However, this did mean that we lost Vestige of Power as well as Stone of Expanse. So we dropped 22% range damage, but we went up 25% weak spot damage. However, we have actually dropped overall DPS. We've dropped from 2631 to 2616. This isn't a huge drop, and it does allow us to have 100% uptime on Ouroboros, which is definitely going to be beneficial, but this is going to be up to you as to whether you would like to make these adjustments. It does allow for greater uptime, but it is also a DPS drop. That being said, just on the note of people saying that this is the DPS king or the best long gun in the game, this is Crescent Moon with momentum in it. This is Stone of Expanse. This is Vestige of Power. This is the stats of just these 4 items. This is the DPS, 2,712. Already we're beating a full build of Deceit. We've not even factored in archetypes. Literally, momentum, crescent moon, 2 rings. Now, I am not saying Deceit is bad. What I am saying is people are very much overestimating how much Deceit is capable of, stating it's the best long gun or the DPS king, etc, etc, etc. Anyway, these are the numbers. It is up to you as to whether you wish to use this weapon. I am not going to give you an opinion as to whether this weapon is good or bad. What I can say though is it is absolutely not the best long gun in the game, nor is it the DPS king. Have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.